This story happened to me a few years ago, back in 2001, when I worked the night shift at a gas station located on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. I would always ride my motorcycle to work. The gas station was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by just road and wilderness. Even though I worked the night shift, several customers would still come by, truckers or regular drivers stopping for gas, food, or to use the restroom. So, I never felt completely alone. That night, everything was going normally. I was ringing up a customer who was buying some snacks when a man walked into the store. He looked to be around 35 years old, very tall and muscular. He headed towards the back aisles where the refrigerators were, as if he was picking out a drink. After finishing with the previous customer, it was just me and that man left in the gas station. I was watching him from the counter, waiting for him to come pay. But as soon as the other customer left, the man turned to look at me from the back of the aisle. His eyes were filled with anger, and he wore a small, cynical smile. The man started walking slowly toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. As he got closer, I could see that his hands were covered in blood, and there were splatters on his face. I started backing up slowly, walking backward while keeping my eyes on him, because I knew his intentions weren't good. When I reached the door, I ran outside toward my motorcycle, but I saw that the man had slashed my tires. At that time, it wasn't common to have a cell phone, and I didn't have one. Any call I needed to make had to be through the store's phone, but I was outside and couldn't get back in. I was praying for a car to pull up for gas so they could help me, but the road was completely empty. Then, I saw the man leave the store and start walking toward me with that same mocking smile and threatening stare. I ran behind the gas station, thinking the back door might be open so I could get inside and call the police, but I had locked it with a padlock a few hours earlier. As I circled back around to the front of the station, I saw a man's lifeless body lying on the ground, completely naked. I was in shock at the sight and screamed louder than I ever had in my life. I frantically looked around to see where the man was, but I had lost sight of him. I moved quietly toward the front of the gas station to see if he was still there, but no one was in sight. Gathering my courage, I ran to the door, quickly locked it behind me and rushed to the phone to call the police. But the man had cut the phone lines with a knife. I was trapped. My only option was to wait for someone to show up and help. I peeked through the large window of the store, and there he was, standing about 12 feet away from the entrance, watching me, his smile growing wider and more sinister. He was enjoying hunting me, knowing I was cornered with no way to call for help. After what felt like half an hour of unbearable tension, I decided to grab a pair of scissors we kept at the register. Armed with nothing but those scissors, I mustered up the courage to open the door and try to run. The man saw me and smiled even more, a terrifying grin revealing yellow, almost rotten teeth. I took one slow step toward him, just to see how he'd react, and he took 2 steps toward me, clearly enjoying the psychological game he was playing. In that moment, I froze, unable to think, and chose to go back inside and lock myself in the store again. The man walked closer, stopping just 2 steps away from the door. I couldn't take it anymore. I shouted, "What do you want? What do you want from me?" But all I got was another twisted grin. Then, he pulled out a massive knife, like a hunting knife, and began scratching it across the glass of the door, taunting me, playing with my mind. I stood at the far end of the store, trembling, gripping the small scissors, knowing they were no match against him. He was nearly twice my size and armed, and it was obvious he was a psychopath. This wasn't his first time taking someone's life. Then I saw a car pull up to the gas pumps. A man stepped out, walking toward the store. I tried to warn him, screaming with all my strength not to come closer, to run, but it was too late. By the time the man saw me, the killer had already reached him. You can imagine what happened next with that knife. I was in complete shock, unable to move. I just stood there, watching as the man dragged the other victim's body behind the store. I knew I should have run at that moment, but my body wouldn't respond. After that, the killer moved the man's car next to mine, slashing its tires as well. Then he returned to his position outside the door, staring at me, his grin growing larger with each passing moment. His eyes were empty. There was no soul in them, only pure evil. Slowly, I began to regain control of my body. I knew I had to fight for my life or end up like those other two men. So, I made the decision to escape through the back door of the store. I knew that if he saw me run that way, he would follow, so I had to be as fast as possible. I grabbed the scissors and ran, not thinking twice. I opened the door and sprinted into the wilderness. Behind me, I could hear his heavy footsteps. He was chasing me like a predator hunting its prey. I kept running until I reached the highway. The man was only a couple of steps behind me, and I could feel my life slipping away when, suddenly, I saw lights in the distance. They were police sirens. The moment I saw them, I stopped hearing the man's footsteps. I turned around and he was gone, lost somewhere in the woods. I kept running, waving frantically at the patrol car until they saw me and stopped. I tried to explain everything to them as best I could. They let me into the car and took me back to the gas station. I was too terrified to get out, so I stayed inside the car while they investigated. They didn't find the man, but they did find the bodies he had left behind. They called for backup, and soon there were more patrol cars and ambulances at the scene. The police took me to the station to give my statement. They showed me a photo and asked if the man in the picture was the one who did all this. I nodded without hesitation. They told me he was an escaped convict from a nearby asylum, extremely dangerous. I felt a momentary relief when I heard they caught him 2 days later and placed him in maximum security. However, the experience left me traumatized for life. I kept seeing him in my nightmares every night, standing outside my house watching me. I went to therapy for several years, and it helped. But this is something that will stay with me forever. My story may not be about ghosts, but believe me, the living are far more dangerous than the dead. My name is Michael. I used to work at a gas station on the outskirts of my city, working the night shift because I attended university during the day. The gas station was quite far out, several kilometers from any other building, surrounded only by wilderness. It was a very quiet place, and to be honest, we hardly ever had customers at night. On a busy night, I might attend to 5 people, which worked out perfectly since I could focus on my schoolwork without too many distractions. I wasn't scared of being alone, until one night everything changed. It was around 2 in the morning. I had my headphones on while finishing up some school notes when a woman walked into the store. She looked very put together, dressed in elegant clothing. She walked to the end of the aisle and I could see her through the security mirror. She stopped there, just staring outside, not doing anything. I took off my headphones and got ready for her to come to the register, but she remained in that same position for several minutes. The situation was strange. I asked her if she needed help, but she didn't answer. At that moment, I knew something was off. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked towards her. She was still standing at the end of the aisle, in the same position, looking outside. What really caught my attention was that she was barefoot. Her feet were filthy and had some injuries. It was all very strange because, as I mentioned, she was well dressed and looked to be in good shape. I asked her again if she needed help, but once again no response. I stepped back and looked outside to see if anyone else was with her, but there was no one. Not even a car parked nearby. The place was completely deserted. I wondered how she had gotten there. It was impossible for her to have walked because the gas station was a 30-minute drive from the city. This was starting to make me uneasy. I hesitated but asked her how she had arrived, and if someone had dropped her off. Again, no answer. I began to feel very nervous. I wasn't prepared for something like this, so the only thing I could think to do was tell her that she had to leave. That if she wasn't going to buy anything, she couldn't stay. For the first time, she turned to look at me, and with her eyes full of fear, she whispered almost inaudibly, "He's coming for me." I asked her who and if I should call the police, but she didn't respond. Instead, she suddenly started crying uncontrollably, staring outside with an inexplicable terror. I immediately locked the door and called 911. The operator told me they would send a patrol, but it would take at least 20 minutes, given how far out the gas station was. I hung up and told the woman to calm down, and that the police were on their way. I kept watching the doors and checking the outside cameras, thinking that maybe someone was after her, trying to kidnap her or worse. To be honest, I imagined all sorts of scenarios. I grabbed a baseball bat that I always kept nearby just in case, since working there at that hour could lead to all kinds of situations, from robberies to dealing with drunk people who refused to leave. I mustered up some courage and went outside to check, but there was no one. The only sound was the faint buzz of a desolate night. Complete silence. When I came back into the store, the woman was gone. I searched the back room, the bathrooms, and everywhere else, but I couldn't find her. It was impossible for her to have left without me noticing. I had only stepped outside for a few seconds, and when I came back, she had vanished. I decided to check the security footage to see where she had gone, and what I saw chilled me to the bone. On the video, there was a figure in a black cloak. You couldn't see its face or body, but it was standing in front of the window, exactly where the woman had been standing. The figure was staring into the store. What terrified me the most was that the shadowy figure had been there the moment the woman entered the store, and it was still there when I went outside to check. I had walked right past it, but I didn't see it. As soon as I went to the back of the gas station, the footage shows the shadow moving away and disappearing into the darkness. I saved the video to show it to the police, because it was hard to explain and even harder to believe. Just then I saw a patrol car arriving, which surprised me because it had only been 5 minutes since I had called. The officers came in and asked what had happened, saying they had received the alert. I asked how they had arrived so quickly, and they told me they had been nearby, as there had been a serious accident just 2 kilometers away, where a woman had lost her life. At that moment, I didn't give it much thought and just told them what had happened, showing them the videos. The officers searched around the gas station but found nothing. They said there wasn't much they could do if the woman wasn't there to give a statement, and since no crime had been committed, there was little they could act on. They advised me to keep the door locked and to call emergency services again if anything else happened. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, and my shift ended in the morning. I went home, took a shower, and lay down to rest for a while before heading to university. I grabbed my phone to check my social media, and that's when I saw it. The news of the accident from that night. A car had crashed into a trailer, and the woman in the car had died just minutes after the collision. The paramedics couldn't do anything to save her. When I saw the photo of the woman, a chill ran down my spine. It was the same woman who had come to the gas station that night, arriving just minutes after the accident. I couldn't think of anything else but that figure outside the gas station. It was death, coming for her. And she had tried to hide, wanting to fight for her life. Unfortunately, she lost the battle. There's no doubt that reality is stranger than fiction, because what I've just told you is a real event that still gives me nightmares to this day. If you are enjoying it, I would greatly appreciate your like and subscription. Let's continue. I was responsible for the convenience store, which was open 24 hours a day, and I worked the night shift because I've always been a night owl. The gas station was located at the entrance of a small town, about 40 minutes from the city where I lived. Over time, many people from the town became my friends, and I grew fond of them since I had been working there for several months. The people in that town were very warm and welcoming. One night, I arrived at work as usual. It was almost 10 p.m. and everything was calm. I was stocking the refrigerators with soda cans that had been delivered that day when, suddenly, I heard footsteps in the back room, which was the storage area. I paused and listened to see if I would hear them again, or if it had been my imagination. Moments later, the footsteps returned, louder this time. I stood up and walked toward the back room, which was at the end of a narrow hallway. I opened the door, turned on the light, and looked around, but no one was there. I turned off the light and closed the door, then returned to stocking the shelves. Suddenly, I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were accompanied by the sound of children laughing. I quickly stood up and ran to the storage room, but once again, it was completely empty. Confused but determined to stay focused, I continued with my work. However, I was starting to feel uneasy, certain that I had heard those sounds. Still trying to be brave, I went back to what I was doing when, out of nowhere, there was a loud bang, as if someone had punched the storage room door with great force. That was the tipping point for me. I stood up and peered down the hallway shouting, "Who's there? I'm going to call the police." But there was no response. At that point, I started to think that maybe someone was outside the storage room, trying to play a prank on me, even though the sounds had clearly come from inside. I didn't want to let my imagination get the better of me, so I shouted, "Oh, really?" As soon as I said that, I heard children's laughter, as if they were mocking me. The laughter came from inside the storage room. I no longer had any doubt that something strange was going on. Just then, a woman from the town came into the store. We knew each other well and always had friendly conversations. She saw me standing still in the hallway and asked, "What's wrong, son?" I turned to her and said, "Good evening, Doña Elena. Some very strange things have been happening." I explained what I had experienced, and she replied, "Yes, I know strange things happen here, and they always will because this place has a very dark history." Curious, I asked her what she meant, and she told me a chilling story. 10 years earlier, before it was a gas station, the property had been a large house that belonged to a former governor of the town. He lived there with his wife and their 2 children, a boy and a girl who were twins, both 7 years old. The governor's wife had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She had been on medication and regularly visited a psychiatrist in the city for several months, but she continued living at home, as they didn't want to admit her to a hospital. One night, while the governor was away on business, the wife, in a fit of delusion and driven by her illness, killed their 2 children. When her husband returned home, he found the horrific scene. The woman was sent to a psychiatric hospital, as her condition made her ineligible for prison. For many years, the house remained abandoned because no one wanted to live in it, despite its size and beauty. Eventually, a businessman bought the property, demolished the house, and built the gas station. Doña Elena also told me that I wasn't the only one who had experienced strange events there. Previous employees, especially those who worked the night shift, had reported similar occurrences. She said she hadn't told me earlier to avoid scaring me or planting the idea in my head, but she knew that eventually I would experience something. She advised me to always carry a rosary with me, and when I heard strange things, to hold it tightly and pray. She also said that if I ever needed help, I could come to her house as she lived nearby. After making her purchase, Doña Elena left. I didn't know what to think. I had never believed in ghosts or the paranormal, and I wasn't someone who got scared easily. But how could I not believe her story after hearing those footsteps and laughter myself? I decided to keep busy to make the night pass faster, so I started sweeping the store. By then it was early morning, around 3 a.m., when I heard the footsteps in the storage room again. This time, the banging on the door was even stronger, happening 3 times in quick succession. I walked toward the hallway and saw the door handle moving, as if someone inside was trying to open it. I ran over and grabbed the handle to stop it from moving, but I didn't want to open the door. I had no idea what I would find on the other side. In my mind, I kept telling myself, I can't let them know I'm scared. I need to handle this. I shouted, "That's enough, leave." Suddenly, everything went silent. For a moment, there was nothing. But just as I was about to walk away, the power went out in the entire station. I rushed to the front and grabbed a flashlight. I tried to go outside to check the fuse box, but I realized I was locked in. The door wouldn't open. I tried using my keys, but they didn't work. The door was completely stuck. That's when I felt a fear like I had never felt before. I turned the flashlight toward the hallway to make sure no one was there, then started banging on the windows, hoping someone would hear me. But no one passed by at that hour. The area was surrounded by empty lots, and it was rare for anyone to come to the gas station at that time of night. Realizing I was trapped, I knew I was in trouble. The phone line was down, and my cell phone had no signal. I stood with my back against the door, shining the flashlight down the hallway. Then I saw the storage room door slowly creak open. I heard the murmurs of small children, followed by laughter. I squeezed my eyes shut, not wanting to see whatever was coming out of that room. I knew I couldn't handle it. I was sweating cold, tightly shutting my eyes and praying the few prayers I knew. Suddenly I felt a cold breath near my ear. That's when I dropped the flashlight and ran through the store, screaming for them to leave me alone. I didn't look back, only wanting to hide from whatever was there. I sat in complete darkness at the far end of one of the store aisles, resigned to whatever was going to happen. I heard small footsteps approaching from the next aisle, accompanied by the sinister laughter of children. Then I felt something touch my hand. A small, cold hand. At the same time, I felt another hand touch my shoulder from the other side, while the chilling laughter surrounded me. I kept my eyes shut. I never opened them. I screamed as loud as I could when I realized the children had found me. I thought, this is it. They've got me. Suddenly I heard someone knocking on the door from outside. Miraculously, the lights came back on. I opened my eyes and there was no one around me. I quickly stood up, still in tears, and went to the door where a man was standing waiting for me to open it. It was a truck driver who wanted to fuel up and buy cigarettes. I opened the door and it opened as if nothing had happened. The man looked at me and asked if I was okay. I told him yes and thanked him for showing up. He looked confused and said he just wanted to buy cigarettes, but thought the store was closed because everything was dark. He said he only knocked because he saw my car parked outside. I thanked him again, rang him up, and after he left, I grabbed my things, locked up the store, and walked to Doña Elena's house, the woman who had told me about the children. I knocked on her door and apologized for the late hour, but I told her that the most terrifying thing in my life had just happened at the gas station. She let me in and gave me a hug. She said she knew something like that would happen eventually because most of the night shift workers at the gas station quit shortly after starting. She said I had lasted the longest and thought it was because of my bravery, since it seemed those spirits thrived on fear, according to the stories told in the town. I stayed with her until morning, then returned to the station only to hand in my resignation. I never went back to that gas station, and I don't know what happened to the place or if it's still a gas station. But whatever it is now, those souls will remain there, haunting anyone who dares to stay alone at night.